So I started writing this blog about, I guess it's 2 months ago now. And to be honest with you, the real reason I wrote this is because I started to have all these thoughts and ideas. And I wanted to see, if anybody would get anything from it, if anybody would react to it or even care. And it's funny because, I started educating myself about, how the internet and how broadband is affecting other people. I've been fortunate enough that the internet's kind of been guiding my entire career. But I started to look around and realize that everyone doesn't have that same luxury and same access. And I felt like at this point in my life, I wanted to figure out how I could help educate some people and give some things back. And then I started hearing about this whole idea of net neutrality, this big bill, that's a regulation that's being talked about at the FCC. And I think just like a lot of you, I kind of looked at it and said, yeah, the net neutral, why wouldn't I want it? But I think, I started investigating, and it's more buzzwords than anything else. And I think the real issue that people need to focus on, which I'm starting to focus on, is how do we get more people online? More importantly, how do we get more minorities online? I started looking at some studies. There's a study called the Pew Internet Study that shows only 48% of African Americans have adopted broadband in their home of any sort. And you think about that. Everybody probably has an iPhone, a BlackBerry, or has internet access in their home. But for every one of those people, there's at least 1.5 person out there that doesn't have the internet at all, doesn't have access to entertainment, doesn't have access to medical information when their child gets sick, doesn't have access to career advancement and job sites that no one puts their job ads in newspapers anymore. They don't have access to any of that. So I'm kind of committed to focusing on that. When you kind of hear about this net neutrality issue and people are talking about regulations and getting access to sites, and you dig a little deeper and realize that's not the real issue, we need to shift people's focus. And also we need to get more educated. The reality is, how can we even talk about putting some regulations in place when so many of people aren't have access to the internet in the first place? They don't know how it's going to affect them. They don't know how it's going to change their lives. So we need to really focus on that. We need to focus on educating people of why the internet's so valuable. We need to tell them, we need to really, what I like to call is we need to change their value proposition, right? We need to show them why the internet's valuable, right? That people who have made their living on the internet are far too few in the minority community, and there needs to be more of us. I mean, I can honestly tell you, I've started several businesses where I've never even met the people who are my clients. It was all done over the internet, right? And the barrier to that is zero. If you give me any idea that you're thinking of, I can probably help you figure out a way to do that at little or no cost. And that's not anything special about me. That's the power and beauty of what's online and what can be accessed by other people if we change their value proposition and make them understand how important it is. So let's get started, and I'll start doing this on a regular basis so we can start to figure that out together. So I have this concept that this kind of sticks in my head about changing the value proposition of inner city youth to see the value of being an entrepreneur. I kind of think about myself and how the internet's changed my life. And then I think about some of the opportunities I've been blessed with over the last few years to do some pretty amazing things. And I think, we need to figure out a way to communicate that to inner city youth and change their value proposition. Think about it. There's kids in school today who think it's easier to become an entertainer or an athlete than to become an internet entrepreneur, right? Who look at that as being their only means to be successful, to be wealthy, and to provide back for their families. When the reality is, if you think about it, the internet is one of the lowest barriers to entry of any career decision in your world. I mean, I can tell you from my experience. I mean, I've been to places like Facebook. I've been to these startups. And I believe if we took some children from the inner city and showed them this environment and told them, hey, if you learn these set of skills, you could work a place like this, the line would be around the corner. And then what would come out of that? One of those people would say, you know what, it's great to work here, but I want to create my own. We need to start fostering those ideas in the inner city and create the next generation of entrepreneurs. And I started writing about it, but I need to start talking about it too. And we all need to think about how do we do that. So take a look at some of the blogs I've written before and look at some of them in the future, because we're going to continue on this issue. Let's create a new generation of entrepreneurs. So before I forget, there was another thing about that conference that kind of threw me off, is that, when we talk about trying to get people online, that, these legislators are racking their brains about how to get the internet into their areas. And then they had to shift their focus to talk about net neutrality. But the reality is, how can they talk about net neutrality when they don't even have a seat at the table? When people they know people in their jurisdiction don't have the internet, don't have access to the internet, or haven't adopted the internet for various reasons, and then they're asked to vote on regulations that are going to change those people's lives before they even enter the game. I mean, think about it. It's the equivalent of sitting down to play a card game and only having half the deck. There's people who need to have their voices heard, who we need to focus and get them on the internet first. Before we do anything else, we need to focus on getting these people access. I mean, it's crazy to me that we're even talking about how do you regulate something that I know for a fact that, you know, half the people in the world don't have access to. Half minorities in the world, more than half of African Americans, don't have access to the internet. So why are we talking about how we regulate something that they don't even understand the full beauty and openness of? You know, the internet is open. The internet's been open for me my entire life, and I've been able to achieve a lot of success from it. I want to make sure that there's more people like me. You know, I don't want to be an anomaly. I want to be an everyday occurrence. I want to be able to look around and see a generation of entrepreneurs that have flourished through this recession using the internet. So let's make that our focus. Let's talk to people about that before we focus on anything else.